Welcome back to another creature creation video where this time I will be talking about Lester. Lester I have mentioned before because my last video of Gwen revealed that he is her brother, and I think it would only make sense for me to introduce him next because I would like to do more around their species, and I think having a grounding of both Gwen and Lester would make it a lot easier for you guys to understand where I'm coming from. Hopefully. So, I drew Lester quite early on in the forest. I think he was like the 4th or 5th creature that I drew, and he was originally supposed to be a unique character. There was going to be no other creature like him. He was the offspring of a dryad and a satyr, and you didn't see that pairing anywhere else. It wasn't until much later on when I drew Gwen that I decided that he wasn't the most unique character, that he had a sister, and it's only occurring to me now that both Gwen and Lester might have a species of their own. So that also means that there are more dryads and satyrs in the forest than I originally planned. So from the offset, his story has spiraled quite a bit, and hopefully I can give you a good overview of everything in this video, but we'll see if that happens. And I'll try not to make it too chaotic. Let's start with the name, Fauna. So, Lester was originally called a sheep because, to me, when I drew him, he looks like a leafy sheep. And I don't know what happened in my brain that made me think that that was an appropriate name, but I quickly realised, why would he be called a sheep, combination of sheep and leaf, if he was actually part goat? It would make more sense for him to be called a geef, and that sounds wrong. I could not call a character that. But he remained a sheep for a very long time until I drew Gwen, and then I really knew that I could not call their species sheeps. And it was at that point that I turned to social media to help me because I was stumped. I knew that they both needed a good name, especially because at this point, Gwen was becoming main character and my main focus, so I really wanted to make sure that I was doing her justice. And it was through the suggestions of my lovely followers that I decided to call their species Fauna. So, in Roman mythology, satyrs, like Gwen and Lester's father, were known as fauns rather than satyrs, and I decided to mesh that together with the botanical fauna, Fauna, to create the species name Fauna, Fauna. And I got really excited when I made this species name because it fit and it worked so well, and it was a relief almost. But then I decided that there needed to be a distinction between the goat-like faunas and the humanoid faunas, which I don't know if it will ever come up in the story. I don't know if it adds anything to the story, but I think it adds more depth to the forest. So after a quick Latin search, I did do Latin, but as you can imagine, I did not remember any of it. Anyway, after a quick Google and Latin search, I came across Capra and Humaniformis, and I decided that they were the perfect identifiers to add to Fauna. So Lester is a Fauna Capra, whereas Gwen is a Fauna Humaniformis. So their species has grown in name and number since I created Lester. But this video is about Lester, not the species as a whole, so let's get back to him. When I was originally creating this page, the stain that you can see on this side, because it's mirrored, it wasn't giving me a lot. There were these splodges in the corner, which eventually became his face, but there wasn't a huge amount going on here, which tripped me up, and it made it really difficult for me to create anything because I wanted it to be unique. I didn't just want to draw a goat or a sheep. So I had to figure out what I was going to draw, and I took quite a while. I think I did actually take a break and made some of the other creatures in the sketchbook and then came back to it later when I was a little bit fresher. I hadn't been staring at it for days, and I decided that I was going to follow the coffee stain exactly and then just see what came out. So that's where we got the head from, and then this huge body. I did not know what to do with it. As I said, I didn't want to create anything that was kind of like outside the coffee stain, so it did give me a challenge. But as I was pondering it through, I was thinking a lot about what creatures might be in the forest and how they might interact with each other. And I have always loved myths and stories surrounding satyrs. I don't know why, they just fascinate me. And in fact, I even did my master's dissertation on a topic that heavily involved satyrs, so maybe I have a little bit of an obsession with them, but I kind of wanted to put them in the forest in some capacity. So that's what I did. But it would make no sense for Lester to be a goat-like figure if his father was a satyr, unless there was something in his other parentage, his mother's side, that affected that. And I have always seen dryads and satyrs as linked. I'm not sure why. I think it's because they're both nature spirits. They're both representative of the wild, but they always seem to go hand in hand to me. So I took that relationship a little bit further than I maybe should have, and Lester came out. And honestly, it did turn out perfect. With this weird coffee stain, I created a creature that was half dryad, half satyr, and basically looks like a bush with a face. Parentage and reasoning resolved. His backstory formed quite slowly. Originally, he was A, supposed to be a unique character, there wasn't another one like him, and B, he was supposed to be this like calm, playful figure, kind of just a playmate for the bluebell foxes that he happened to live near. He was supposed to be unserious and kind of carefree. Not how he is now. I must say, out of all the creatures in the forest, I think Lester has changed the most since I've started writing. He did stay quite a simple character for a very long time, but it was when I started writing Gwen that I realised he needed more depth. Kind of to match her depth, but it also happened quite organically. I realised that while he and Gwen were close, he would be a more nomadic creature than Gwen is. Gwen is quite a homebody, and I like to think that she takes after her dryadic mother, whereas Lester takes after his satyr father, leading a more nomadic lifestyle. So he would wander the forest, meeting all of these other creatures and basically collecting tales and stories for Gwen, as well as more of the rare medicinal supplies that she needed. But they kept in contact, and he visited every so often and would regale her with tales from the forest and his adventures. And he didn't realise it at the time, but he was stoking the wanderlust in Gwen. While he may have begun as an unserious playmate for the bluebell foxes, he has definitely got his own story to tell now, and he definitely has his own secrets, which may or may not be revealed in time. Another way that he's grown is I originally didn't think of him as having an ability, but recently, with Gwen's ability, I decided that Lester likely has an ability as well. just different from Gwen's. And I decided that as a four-legged, cloven, hooved creature, let's face it, they're limited in what they can do. So I decided that all of these branches and leaves and plant life that is covering him, that is part of his body, he can control and manipulate a lot like we do our fingers, arms, and hands. So he suddenly became a creature that could interact with the forest in a lot of different ways than just a goat would, which has actually been quite interesting to write, and I think that it gives him more physical range that I enjoy. Lester has become such an interesting character in the forest and in Gwen's story that I do see him having more tales of his own to tell, especially with his travels as a nomadic creature. There must be a story in there somewhere, whether it is an anthology of short stories or something a little bit more cohesive and adventurous. There's definitely something that I can write about him. But currently he is needed for Gwen's adventure, and that is my focus at the minute. Maybe in the future he will get his own tales told. I really hope so, because I can see him being a nice character to write. An interesting character to write. For the fauna as a species, I am very excited to explore them more. I am chomping at the bit to draw more of them, and I will likely do a draw with me video sketching them and explaining their backstories and how they come to me. And you never know, they might even have their own stories to tell. So yeah, if you would like to see that, then make sure you subscribe, and if you've liked this video, please hit the like button, and I will see you in the next video.